The frozen portrait. The first scream came from Lily. Clara turned just in time to see her niece backing away from the portrait, her small hands shaking as she pointed. "They moved!" Lily cried, her voice breaking. Clara's stomach dropped. She didn't need to ask what Lily meant. She'd seen it too, the painted mother's head tilting ever so slightly. "Get behind me," Clara said, her voice trembling. But before she could move, the laughter started, soft, echoing, and far too close. Clara didn't believe in ghosts. She didn't believe in curses or haunted houses. She believed in things she could see and touch. The house, her great-aunt's old estate, had seemed like a blessing, a chance to start fresh after a bitter divorce and years of struggle. She'd packed her life into a few suitcases, driven hours into the countryside, and arrived at the towering Victorian home with nothing but hope and a toolbox. But the moment she stepped through the door, the house seemed to breathe around her. She laughed it off at first. The creaking floors, the cold drafts, the way shadows seemed to cling to the corners of every room. But the portrait was different. It hung in the sitting room above the fireplace, massive and commanding. The painted family, a man, a woman, and 2 children, seemed too real, as though they were watching her. Clara tried to ignore it, but it became impossible. Every time she entered the room, her eyes were drawn to the painting. She couldn't shake the feeling that their expressions weren't fixed, that they shifted when she wasn't looking. When she mentioned it to her sister Olivia during a phone call, Olivia laughed. "You're just tired," she said. "Or maybe you're just not used to being alone." But Clara wasn't alone for long. Her niece, Lily, arrived the following weekend, an exuberant 9-year-old who loved to draw. She'd brought her sketchbook and a suitcase full of coloured pencils, excited to spend time in the creepy mansion, as she called it. On her first night, Lily noticed the portrait immediately. "Aunt Clara, who are they?" she asked, pointing to the painting. Clara hesitated. "I don't know, maybe family." "They don't look happy," Lily said, frowning. Clara tried to laugh it off. "Maybe they're just tired." But when Lily's sketchbook began to fill with drawings of the family, drawings where their faces were twisted into grimaces, Clara began to worry. The whispers started that night. At first, Clara thought it was the wind, but Lily was certain. "They're talking," she whispered. "The people in the painting. I can hear them." Clara tried to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but the whispers grew louder, and then the smiles appeared. The change was subtle at first. The mother's lips curved upward, just slightly. The next day, the father's mouth stretched into a grin. By the end of the week, all 4 faces were smiling. It was unnatural, too wide, too sharp, as though the smiles had been carved into their faces. When Olivia came to visit, Clara showed her the painting, desperate for answers. Olivia stared at it for a long time before speaking. "They're feeding off you." "What?" Clara asked, incredulous. Olivia looked her sister in the eye. "The house, the painting, it's all connected. It wants you. It wants her." She nodded toward Lily. The house had a history, a dark one. Decades ago, the family in the portrait had lived there. They were reclusive, keeping to themselves, until one stormy night when they vanished without a trace. The only thing left behind was the painting. Over the years, the house changed hands, but the stories remained. Whispers of people disappearing, of strange sounds, of something in the walls. "They say the house traps you," Olivia said. "Once it gets in your head, it doesn't let go." Clara didn't want to believe her. She didn't want to believe any of it, but belief didn't matter when the house was already closing in. That night, everything fell apart. It began with the painting. The family stepped out of the frame, their painted forms solidifying into flesh. Their smiles were impossibly wide, their eyes black pits. Clara grabbed Lily, but the doors wouldn't budge. The walls seemed to pulse, the air growing heavier with each passing second. "They're coming," Lily whispered. Clara turned to see the figures advancing, their steps slow and deliberate. "You shouldn't have stayed," the father said, his voice low and cold. Clara screamed, pulling Lily behind her as the figures reached for them. The room spun, the walls melting into shadows. Clara felt herself being pulled, her body growing heavier, her vision blurring. When she woke, the house was silent. The painting hung above the fireplace, but it was different now. The family still smiled, but they were joined by two new figures. A woman and a little girl, their faces frozen in terror, their painted eyes forever watching. The house waits now, as it always has. It is patient, and when someone new arrives, it will smile again. Thank you for joining me in this little corner of storytelling darkness. If any of my tales manage to amuse, unsettle, or make you question your life choices, feel free to like and subscribe. It's not like the Void Minds Company, or does it?